55 Sports. Andy Backstrom, EagleAction.com, part of the Rivals.com network, joins us now. And Andy, thanks so much for being on the show. Boston College saw a nice little uptick last year. Part of that is they've got a really good quarterback, an exciting player in Phil Jurkovec, who's back again for another season. Do you think this is a Boston College team, given the fact that outside of Clemson, and they were even down a little bit last year, that the ACC is as wide open as it's ever been?
Thanks for having me on, Paul. Yeah, I mean, the ACC is definitely interesting. The perception is that it's declined in terms of talent and competition in regard to the college football playoff. I think last year was BC's best shot to contend for an Atlantic title. I think people forget about Wake Forest. They're bringing back a lot of talent, too. I think Wake, BC, and Clemson are definitely some of the teams you think about. But FSU is kind of back on the rise. It's a sleeping giant, but I think they could be in play as well. BC's got a tough schedule to play, but I think they'll be in that conversation for sure.
So, Andy, does it kind of start as far as the offseason hype with Jurkovec and just what he was able to do last year and what he could potentially be able to do this season?
So, yeah, it's interesting because people didn't even think he was going to be around this year because they thought he played so well last year that he'd go to the NFL draft, given that it's a weaker class for quarterbacks. What ended up happening was that in week 2, he suffered a season-threatening injury. It was actually non-contact, fell on his throwing hands, ended up hurting his wrist and was out for 6 games. Ended up coming back for the final 4 games. Just wasn't 100%. Had some good moments, had some bad moments. That grip strength wasn't 100%. Now he's back again, and the hype is that he could be, BC's best prospect since Matt Ryan. So obviously, the intangibles are there. He's 6'5", 230. He can move well. Kind of a dual threat guy in high school. Developed more as a pocket passer. In college, he's very mobile. So that's definitely where the hype starts. And then also he's got a wide receiver in Zay Flowers, who's probably going to be BC's first wideout drafted since 1987. So this is a guy who's very dynamic, almost kind of like Deebo Samuel in the sense of you want to get him the ball every play. That's just how important he is to Boston College. He can run with it. He can catch it. He's a downfield threat, but he also can make moves at the line of scrimmage in space.
What do you think will be kind of the swing moment for them, whether we know they're a real contender or not? How early in the season do you think that comes?
I think we'll know very early. And unlike last year, they played a cakewalk schedule to start last season. They started 4-0, they went to Death Valley, then they lost 4 straight games in ACC play. This year, on the other hand, they started Rutgers, they host Rutgers. And Rutgers is not going to be a pushover like they have been for much of the last decade. And then they go to Virginia Tech. They play in Blacksburg, probably a night game. You're going to learn quickly. A couple weeks later, they play against FSU in Tallahassee. Those are 2 tough road environments. I think we'll know 4 weeks in what kind of Boston College team we have. So that when Clemson comes on October 8th, we'll have a picture of whether or not that's actually going to have any stake for the Atlantic Division.
Andy, I got to go back. First receiver drafted since 1987.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just looked. Kelvin Martin, drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. How in the world did they not have a receiver, like a single guy drafted since 1987?
It's interesting because the last couple of years, they've actually had some guys that have been in the NFL. Jeff Smith, the guy at the New York Jets, he kind of got a shot because he ran a sub 4.3 unofficial at BC's Pro Day, and he's kind of stuck around on the active roster / practice squad. Michael Walker was a guy who was with the Jags for a little bit. So they've had some guys in the NFL for a little bit here and there, mostly because of roster problems for those organizations. But they haven't had a guy drafted in decades. And it's mainly because BC has a reputation of running the football down your throat.
Right.
Think about A.J. Dillon, Andre Williams, even other guys that are not as big names, John Hillman, guys that just can pound it down your throat. And O-line U is another reputation that BC has, producing big O-linemen that will just block for you up front. So passing is kind of something that's come back into the fold with Jurkovec, and it's something that they're planning to incorporate a lot this year with the new offense coordinator, John McNulty.
Do you think that they have some coaching staff continuity, and for the first time in a while, it felt like they were kind of making reactionary hires for a while there at BC?
So, yeah, they had some changeover this year because the offensive coordinator, Frank Signetti Jr., ended up going to Pitt, which is a hometown school for him. He's from Pittsburgh. And So he's there now. So they brought in a new offensive coordinator and 3 new position coaches. So there is more change staff-wise this year than there was last year. But it's actually welcome change because the assistants that they did lose ended up with NFL teams. And the ones that they brought in, they're hoping is a better mix in terms of used to be a very youthful staff as Hasley first came in. Now there's a little bit more of experience mixing in with that youth, and they're hoping that's a better blend, especially for the offense.
So John McNulty, the new OC, he's been around the block a few times. What is it about him, or what's kind of the message been as far as what he's looking to do? Having a great wide receiver, a great quarterback to work with. What are you kind of expecting out of the Eagles offense?
Yeah, so BC is going to move away from a pro-style offense. That's what they had with Frank Signetti. It's going to be a little bit more like the college game. You're going to have the RPOs, quick passing, getting the ball to playmakers in space, probably going to swing some running backs outside. McNulty's coming from Notre Dame. He was the tight ends coach there for a few years. He's been around the block, as you said, but most recently in Notre Dame. And he said he really liked what Tommy Rees is doing there in terms of just kind of playing positionless on offense, just getting your guys, whether it was last year switching Chris Tyree to more of like a wide receiver than a running back. And he's really interested in doing that at BC too. So they've got some guys that might typically run up at running back. You'll see out wide. I think it's going to be a lot of personnel packages, mostly 12 with 2 tight ends, probably some 11, and even some 13 with some 3 tight end sets. So it's going to be interesting what they do, but definitely more college-like. Probably getting the ball quicker. Problem with the offense the last couple of years was pro style, and it took a while for plays and progressions to develop. So it was kind of hit or miss. Sometimes they hit on the deep ball, but other times Jurkovec was kind of swarmed because no matter how well they protected up front, the plays were taking too long to develop.
Andy Backstrom, EagleAction.com, part of the Rivals.com network, here with us on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Andy, great stuff. Enjoy the spring. Do they do a game, or is it more of a scrimmage?
It's more of a scrimmage, but they call it a game. It's actually tomorrow at 11 a.m., so they'll be kicking off a slate of ACC spring games tomorrow. First time it's open to the public since 2019 because of the pandemic. So it'll be good to have some energy in there. And look forward to the 2022 season.
All right, Andy, absolutely. We're going to have you back as the season progresses and things go on. Thank you so much for hopping on the show today. Appreciate it. Nice to talk to you for the first time. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the family, so to speak.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me on. Right. Have a good one.
All right. Andy Backstrom with us talking BC. And then we're going to try to do as many of those as we can to kind of get the perspective from around the country, because we have people watching from around the country. Yeah. BC is interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean they're not a team that I think of all that often. I'll be honest with you.
Well, they're in my guys' division.
No, I understand that. Yeah, but in Big 12 countries, like not often we just talk about Boston College, or not often I think about Boston College. But yeah, I mean having Jurkovec back is massive for them. Like he said, could have been an NFL guy not that long ago, and then just unfortunately injuries wiped out last year for the most part. But Zay Flowers is a really good player, and it's always interesting. The positionless, he's talking about that. It's a lot of like what Dave Arend and them were doing. I was doing all these reviews and stuff, and you might have a guy listed as a tight end, but he actually played just as much fullback, or he's more of an H-back, or he even played. Like there's guys who are just kind of, it's just wherever you can fit at any given time, ultimately, with some of these guys where they do become sort of positionless and they're not just one thing. That has become, or has been, a trend around college football. Definitely saw it with Baylor, and, it'd be interesting to see how that plays into BC's hands. But, definitely got excitement. I do think he's right, though, he's right about, kind of the Florida State sleeping giant and just the sort of the opportunity that may have been there and how much longer that window is really open, because it has kind of been, it was Clemson or bust. And maybe last year there was a brief window for everybody else. And, Miami, obviously, Cristobal, I mean, they're going to be rip-roaring and ready to go. And Virginia Tech's made changes. And so the ACC is pretty interesting, but that still is crazy to me. No wide receiver drafted. I mean, the reason why it's crazy is he's not talking about first round. He's talking about period.
At all.
Like, not even a pick since 1987.
There were 12
Not
rounds.
one.
There were 12 rounds until what, 90?
And I understand you got A.J. Dillon and you got all these cats that came through there and you were more of a running team, but not a single wide receiver since 1987. And I'm sure there's other schools that have they haven't had a tight end since 45 or whatever, but that's still just to hear that is pretty crazy.
Like Georgia Tech was running the triple option and got a Hall of Famer drafted.
Exactly, yeah,
and
one of the
Calvin
best of all
Johnson.
time.
So, I mean, sometimes you just get guys.
Yeah, that's just not a
come
stat
through. Yeah, it's
that
weird.
I would have known about, but that was interesting to hear that. Yeah, you're right, though. Yeah, one of the greatest of all time was at Georgia Tech when they were not trying to really, be the air raid or anything.
Running the inverted wishbone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they were doing at Georgia Tech at the time.
That's going to change as they flower. So,
Yeah,
good
absolutely.
for them.